Cool. So, welcome to CDR here at the Glove That Fits. Before we continue, can you give a round of applause to the guys in this space? Really, you know what I thought you were going to do there? When the kick drum went, I thought you were going to... Musicians definitely in the house. Cool. Yeah, it's a really special place here. It's really, really cool. If this is your first time, welcome. This is CDR, the night of ideas and tracks in the making. Essentially, it's about artists, music producers, sine waves, gated with a effect compressor. And just the idea of just having a place to hear music that you're working on with like-minded people and hear music productions and production processes from artists that we like. We're here with Object Blue. Give it up, people. And for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to get some insight into her production process. More importantly, the first two releases that she did, and then some. So, thank you very much for being with us today.
Yay, thanks for having me.
It's amazing. I can see some LFO MIDI there, Maxwell Live patches there, so you're in a good place.
Yeah.
So before we dive in, just wanted to ask you just a couple of kind of basic questions, but more importantly, at what point did you consider this idea of a music career and taking it a bit more seriously and focusing and making it a thing? When was that?
I didn't think about the career very much until Sarah, my agent, who I love, hit me up.
Thank you, Sarah.
But ever since I picked up music production in like 2014, 2015, and then from the get-go, I knew I really wanted to dedicate a lot of time to it and like really be as good as I can, because I started it because I really needed to, not as like a hobby thing. It was really like I have to learn production and make my own sounds, unless I'm going to I'm going to explode, and just so yeah. I was like, well, I'm not like tied down with much, life pressure. Yeah, at that time I was like 22, so I thought like if I'm gonna do it, it has to be now.
And was that because you were listening to lots of really interesting music and you had a connection to music and you felt that you had to, you were inspired by that, and then you felt you had to make your own music? What was the thing that...
Yeah, I've been listening to music like really obsessively since I was a child. But what really influenced me actually was one of my friends who used to produce under Simara, and now he produces under Yasha. And he was really like influenced by One Tricks Point Never and like DJ Purple Image and people like that. And he put out an EP around that time I started producing. I'm actually going to play some now.
Cool,
and it really, really influenced me. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'm actually allowed to make music like this. Like, this counts as music, which was really nice.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, he's like one of my closest friends, and he mainly makes footwork and juke now. But back then he was really making stuff like this, and I asked him like, okay, I think I really have to bite the bullet and download Ableton, because I was always really afraid to start, because what if I start and I know how to use Ableton and what I make sounds like shit? It's like the most devastating thing. Like, you have all of these sounds in your head, and what if it's actually terrible and it's not, like, you know, worth listening to? But I still was going to do it because I needed to listen to it, whatever I had in my head. And he's from New York, so we never got to meet in real life. So he sent me videos like of his screen recording. Yeah, like, this is how you EQ
You said your one-to-one tutorials. So
Yeah.
no YouTube for you. You just went straight to the source. I love it. Friend makes great record. You're going to teach me.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's so much more organic that way, because a lot of the people who do YouTube tutorials, like, they're technically really great, but what they're into is not necessarily what you're into, what you want to make. But I had this person who I had a personal relationship with and whose work I really, really admired. So I decided to learn Ableton because he asked me to remix one of his tunes for this record, which is such a huge risk because he'd never heard any of my production before. And I was like, are you serious? Like, what if it's terrible? And he was like, well, we've been talking about music for 3 years. Like, you're clearly obsessed with it. I really want you to try it. And besides, like, no one's going to listen to my record. It doesn't matter. So that's how I picked up Ableton. And then I remember making it, and I was just like crying. I was like, this is terrible. He's never going to talk to me again. But yeah, that was the beginning of it all.
Wow. So when you said you were crying and you thought it's terrible, was it more about the compositional ideas or the music production, or a mix of both? Why was it terrible?
Well, because when, like, I really believe in the importance of having your own taste, because I think that's what distinguishes you from other people. And taste is not really about competition. It's not about whose taste is better, but like, it's how definite are your tastes? Like, how well do you know it? Is there room for growth as to how your taste evolves, or do you know what you like and you're gonna stick to it? But when you're first coming into music production, and especially like weird music like this, it's quite hard to tell objectively, like, am I just crazy? Like, is this just a phase? Like, is this like the goth phase that everyone regrets, you know, once they grow up? But then after I made a few, I was like, no, I do like this, and my friends want to listen to it, and my friends are putting on gigs and ask me to, you know, play. So maybe it is like okay in a way. So, but it took about like a year until I was really like, okay, like, this is my taste, and I'm gonna do something with it.
So it's more like just after initial download and with some ideas and having palpitations and crying fits. Yeah. It's about just allowing yourself to just be with the music that you made, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
And stop trying to compare yourself to your friend and actually find what you're about as an artist, at least at this initial phase, right?
Yeah, I mean, at first I was really afraid that everything I made would just sound like a bad copy of Björk's production, because she was the like very first electronic music influence I had. And then from there I went into glitch, and then like obviously I listened to a lot of Aphex Twin, and then I found like Mark Fell and blah blah blah. But then I knew this girl who was like the biggest Björk fan in the world, and she was like, don't worry, you don't sound anything like her. And I was like, oh, thank God.
Phew.
Yeah. Because I'm not really interested in like making something that sounds like other people, because if other people can make it that well, I'd rather just sit home and listen to that without worrying about how's my CPU, like, you know, how's my mixing. But because there were sounds that I really wanted to listen to, and I could hear it in snippets, I'd listen to somebody's track and be like, oh, that part sounds good, but I don't understand why like the lower frequencies sound like that, or I don't understand why it happens in this structure. I'd rather took this from this track and took that from this track and arranged it like that. So that's why I started doing it. It was really like to satisfy a craving. Yeah.
And at what point did your agent, when did that happen?
So I played my first ever live gig, I think in November 2017, and or yeah, something like that. And then I DJ'd for the first time ever in January of 2018. Maybe I'm getting this wrong. Maybe it's a year before that. Anyway, Sarah hit me up in like April, March 2018.
Around then, yeah.
Yeah. So, because by that time I was already getting booked a lot of like independent gigs, and you know it was like, oh, will you play? Can we can pay you like £40? And I'm like, great, that's a lot of money. Like I'm so happy. And then sometimes they were like, can we call you an Uber home? And I'm like, what? And then I was like handling all the bookings myself, and I played 2 shows in Dalston 2 nights in a row, and one of the promoters got really upset with me. And I was like, I don't understand how to do any of this. And then when Sarah came on, I was like, yes, please help me. And I still really think I am so like unfit for adult life in our society. Like I'm really lucky that I have a booking agent, I have a PR like manager as of like a couple months ago, because I just think about this. Like this is all I think about, and it's nice.
Well, in an ideal world, that's the best situation, right? You can just be an artist, and they facilitate your crazy snares and reverb tails.
I don't know. I think it's different for people. I just jammed with DJ Bus Replacement Service. It was really great.
What a name is that, right?
I know. But like, it's so funny because people in her boiler room are like, oh, she doesn't take herself seriously. I'm like, well, have you seen her name? Like, of course she doesn't, you know? She's not trying to prove herself as legitimate to all you stupid commenters. Like, you know, she does what she wants, and it's very silly and very, like, jovial, and I love it. But she's a lawyer during her day-to-day life, and she said she never wants to do more music than law. That's how she has keeps her balance. Yeah, sure. But I'm not like that. This is like everything I am. I used to be a secretary. I was like the worst secretary ever. I would like sometimes just not show up, and my boss will be like, "Where were you?" And I'll be like, "Pratt." I'd also do that as well.
Refill.
Is that
That's right. Oh yeah, as long as laptop wasn't there, it's
Can I
fine.
get another Aperol Spritz, please?
Yeah. I think we can get that the whole secretary thing didn't work out, I'm sure.
It did not work out. You know, my sister's husband hired me, and then by the end he was like, "Can you leave already?"
But all this means is that you're destined for this. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
I hope
you know,
so.
Yeah, definitely. So, talk us through how you went from, you know, a kind of almost like a fast, accelerated paced career to that started off with you performing live, right? And then channeling those ideas into your first EP. Talk us through that. I find that's really interesting.
So I made a lesson plan, because the last one of these I talked about like one drum sample for 60 minutes, and it was really embarrassing. So I wanted to talk quickly through how I made my first EP, Do You Plan to End a Siege, and then my second EP, which is Rex, and then I'll discuss some details, like some of my favorite like techniques, and then general things later. But the reason why I'm starting with EP1 is not just because it's chronological, but I really started out as like a live improviser. It's still the hardest thing for me to start and finish a track 5 times and then put it into an EP. It's like so hard for me. So when I was getting booked to play independent gigs all by myself, what you see on the screen now is basically what I would do every set. I would have a few drum racks that I base on. I use a lot of Ableton Native stuff. I think they're great. And but this, like, for example, this is a sample I took from elsewhere. This is a sample I took from elsewhere. But I make my own drum rack. And then I have a pattern on this drum rack. And then for my second drum rack, which has different sounds, I might play this. I did my live sets. I'd trigger different patterns, samples, and it was mainly perk section, which is this one obviously, but I always liked having more than one drum rack, because why not? And I would have more atmospheric stuff. I do it as MIDI so that it doesn't get too messy, because I like using a lot of found sounds, field recording, sampling from a film. And I was aware that if I was playing a live set and I just started playing like 3 news recordings in a row, like everyone would be like, what the hell, I did not pay money for this. So by splicing it into MIDI and making it, you know, a pattern like this, still kind of sensitive, you know? I liked speech in my tracks, because speech is one of those things that's not made for musical purpose, and it doesn't have rhythm, it doesn't have pitch compared to organized music. It lacks all of these things fundamentally, but it's something our brain really latches onto, and you start to see patterns in it. And I really like that. Really runs through all of my music. When people say like, "Oh, why did you sample Cardi B?" Like, I get a bit annoyed, because if you just treat it as like a sonic element, I think it's quite easy to see why I sampled it. It's because it has its own rhythm. It has a frequency range that none of my other tracks have. Like by tracks, I mean Ableton tracks. So like none of the perk section or the samples or the synths cover the frequency range of Cardi's voice, because that's her voice. And the frequency range is what makes it her voice. So I think as long as there are enough structure supporting her voice, it absolutely works as a musical element. I mean, I also really like tracks where nothing is held together by an overarching musical structure, but that's music concrete, and I'm not here for that right now. So I have this pattern, right? I wrote it, and I used to only pencil in my patterns. One, because I had no MIDI controller. I'm a terrible percussionist. I don't trust myself to do it well. And also because I really went into music listening to like loads of Mark Fell. I've always really liked the robotic, very precise, no room for, you know, like human error sort of thing. So I just used to always pencil it in. And I would deactivate all of these. Let's activate it for a second. Copy and paste that into 3 ranges and activate some of them so that I have room for example, this drum pattern.
So in a way, you're not making, there's a disconnect between the events, the actual notes, and the sounds. So you're literally just copying and pasting, placing the events into a drum rack and seeing what happens.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah. For me, it's so much easier to see what happens. I'm not a very regimented person. That's what I mean when I say I'm an improviser. But for example, this one is called Hysitics because obviously I'm a huge Mesh fan. And how I made this is when I make music, I hear it in my head first and I try to replicate it. And what I did with this is all the hits were pretty predictable for me. And then I was like, I really, really need to mess it up to make it interesting for myself because I get bored of my own sounds really quickly. And then his high-tech's album, Mesh, really uses a lot of syncopation. So what I did was I would pencil these in and I'd move it to the right or I'd move it to the left. Sometimes I'd be like, so I don't control it myself.
So that was a...
Yeah, just like leaving it to...
Was there a technique to that as well? Do you mean?
Yeah, there's a technique. So you basically look away and just go like that. And then you record a few patterns and you choose your favorite. So other than that, I think... Hello? Other than that, I think this is pretty straightforward. This one, I'll have to go into arrangement view now. So I played this at Corsica in January of 2018 when I was already talking with TT about releasing an EP. And they were like, please submit demos. And I was like, great, I don't do that. I can't finish demos. Like, how do I even start a demo? So I said to DJ Pitch, just come to my gig and you'll hear new material. And I was really hoping he would be like, great, like, let's take minutes 3 to 5 and make it into a track, and let's take minute 45 to 47 and make it into a track. But he was just like, sounds great, looking forward to the demos. And I was like, fuck. So at this point, I went into the arrangement view. Wait, is this the arrangement view? Yeah, this is the arrangement view.
And you just captured it, right? Yeah.
And then I didn't actually play it, like record it live, because I knew if I tried it at first and I just kept doing like, okay, this is take 23, you know, okay, this is take 24. So what I did was I just dragged these percussion samples and then that's how I made Desperate Tracks. So all my entire EP is in this one live file. And that's why it sounds so uniform. This is track 1, this is track 2, this is track 3. So this is what it's missing. This is the missing media file. This is basically, I think it's a sample of like a car brake, but then I just put it through granular synthesis, and it makes all of these beautiful things. Granular synthesis is like my go-to. I don't think there's a single Ableton file where I don't use it. I just really love the way it sounds, and also it makes a lot of material that you could have never made yourself. It's really the algorithm taking the wheel. And for somebody like me, it's such a godsend. This is when I really had to start thinking about structure. Like, when do I bring the kick in? Like, when is the drop? And what other elements am I going to have running through? Like, this part, I'm already like, oh my god, this is so boring. It's been the same hi-hat pattern for 10 seconds. Like, you can't do this. And so, and this one, this is the one I meant to talk about. So you have this hi-hat pattern and some atmospheric thing going on in the background. And I have a speech. And it's from this film I really love called The Portuguese Nun.
Tenho a ambição de levantar circo.
I knew the EP was really getting into its shape then, so I wanted to emulate something like a wheel turning, like a cog. So this is the one time I used MIDI controller, and then I just went like.
So it's almost like a fill, Musico.
Yeah, you know, I really have no interest in film music, but I do like sampling.
Levantar circo.
part in the whole EP. The hat closing down, and then the nun says "si," and then the kick comes in. Yeah.
Somebody's going to ask you, but I'll ask you. You're a bit of a queen of reverb, track swimming in reverb, right?
Yeah.
Was it always that way?
Oh yeah. My piano teacher had to put like a brick under my sustain pedal because I kept using it. And in piano, I mean, I was never meant to be anything other than a producer, despite my love of music, because like I can't be an instrumentalist because I would never follow the sheet music. And in piano, if you keep the sustain pedal, pressed, then it sounds really, really muddy. But then I'd refuse to let it go for like 2 whole minutes. And by that time, all of the disparate pitch starts dissolving into each other. And I'd be like, listen to this. This is great. Let's open the piano lid and listen to it. And my piano teacher would be like, come on. So yeah, I just really love reverb. And something I heard early on in production is like, you can't use different reverb for different sounds in a track. It's just really messy. I'm sorry, but I will die on this hill. That isn't so stupid. Like why are you using all of these different samples? Why are you using like a 707 rim with like an 808 kick? Like, isn't that messy? So like I think reverb is very much a part of sound design. I use it just to make a drum sound different, not even thinking about the size of the room it's in. And actually, Mesh gave a lecture on production and he said the same thing, and I messaged him like, we understand, man, like everyone else is fucked. So anyway, this is how I did it. I think maybe I'll move on to the next EP because it's already...
No, we're good.
Yes.
Just a couple of questions on this as well, because I really like the idea that this whole EP, first of all, I like the fact that it's all from one piece of work. So it's almost like, if it was like a jazz record or something, or a classical record, you've got they're like suites, right? It's one big thing that's got, your apple is there. So, cool, thanks, man. Do you want to take a sip first and then? I want to make sure. Are we good? I didn't say anything at all. I was patiently waiting for you to have your...
But you did mention classical and jazz.
I did, yes. And I'm going to wait for you to put your glass down. Are you sure you want to put it there? No.
This spritz is really good.
They're good. Yeah, I really like the idea. Look, one of the reasons why, it's really important to have, artist talks like this and production talks like this, because everyone has a different approach to making music, right? So I think a lot can be taken from the fact that, first of all, this came from a performance, so you obviously had some performance, it came from a place of, it had lots of performative elements first, one, but then also it came from a place of improvisation, right? So the fact that this track has come from improvisation and then from performance, and you're having to, almost like, make a form, an arrangement from something which was improvised and something that was performed, which basically means that how it was performed and how it ended up is going to be completely different. Because a lot of people, obviously, when you make a track and you're starting from a composition, it comes from stuff that and you're building from stuff that right? Whereas this is the complete opposite. So it's almost like you're very confident in your ability to actually not knowing what you're doing.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? There's you're obviously you're interested in the sounds and the space and how it sounds and the rhythms, but you're not really placing responsibility on. You're kind of just like, okay, that sounds cool. Do you know what I mean? Oh, that sounds cool. And when you're performing, oh, that sounds cool. A lot of it's about just, really being inspired by what you're hearing. Yeah. And then at some point you have to make sense of it in this kind of world. But what's good about this is that you've kind of said, okay, I want this world to be, 20 minutes, and then I'm going to make the EP sections of that 20 minutes, which is a really great approach.
Thanks, but I don't think I'll do it anymore because
Because someone's going to come here, look, people are going to go, oh, that's a great idea, man. People are going to jam for 20 minutes and, you know, it's a great approach.
That's fine. That's up to them. But the reason why I wouldn't do it anymore is, like I say, I get bored of my own sound really quickly. And having 3 tracks that obviously belong in a very small sonic world really made me worry. After I handed in the demos to TT, I couldn't get out of bed for a day. I was like, this is terrible. Like, and this is gonna be my first release. This is what people gonna remember me by. I might as well just like, I feel like shot myself in the foot. Like, you know, this is terrible. And then Gribbs sent me an all caps message saying like how much she liked Act Like It Then. And then I had to slowly like crawl out of my neurosis. Now that, like, because I never thought more than like, you know, a few hundred people will ever listen to my music. I really didn't expect to have releases until maybe I was like 50 years old. So it was quite it was a big learning process for me to be like, I have to hand in 3 tracks to a label. Then like, these tracks are going to be premiered at different times to different audiences, and it still has to work as one cohesive thing. It's still really difficult for me. And now I'm just like, why don't I just start on Arrangement View and write 4 different tracks on 4 different Ableton live sets, which is what I did for the next EP, except that for Rex, actually, I started working on way before this. The only reason it came out after the CGP is because I started from scratch so many times. For the 4 tracks that are on there were 20 that were discarded completely. Unless there's somebody, like, unless you guys want me to talk something specific about the CGP, I'll move on, but anything?
Any questions on this EP? Move on.
Okay, so... I have to show you this. Okay, so... The year I started making music, I was back in China for a bit, the life of a visa applicant. And then... Before the kick comes in, it's sampled from this fight scene in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which I watched a lot. I remember I didn't edit anything. I didn't, warp it to fit the time because, what's the point of only having music that's really, really precise with no inaccurate, messy elements? Like, for me, that's what makes it really captivating. So I knew I didn't want to, EQ this that much because it's already, Yo-Yo Ma did the music for this film, so it's going to be good. And also in the final fight scene, when she chooses a sword, it goes like the sword rings when she pulls it out. And this scene I also sampled. My computer's gonna give up. So that's what I used for the breakdown. And one of my favorite tricks, you want to make something glitchy, you just chop it up real fine and do this. And it's great, it works a charm. I was really, really influenced by Oval. Like, I really like glitchy sounds. I think that's why I got so into weird music, as you say, because I was like, oh, you know, when your YouTube freezes and it goes like, it sounds so good. Like, why don't people put it in a song? So I was like, I remember submitting a track and then being like, oh, it sounds great, but can you please like do something about all the pops from when the audio sample starts and cuts off? And I'm like, what's wrong with the pops? They didn't do anything wrong. Like, why are you so prejudiced against pops? So, you know, that's my ethos. Let's go into the next EP. So, track 2, Time to Work. This is the first techno track I made. That's why it was a 150 BPM, because I didn't know how fast techno was. I was just guessing. I've always loved to dance, but I didn't really grow up in a place that had good club music. Like, I'm really envious of people who grew up in the UK, because you grew up hearing like lots of really great stuff. But I didn't. I lived in like a suburb in Beijing, and I knew I liked electronic sounds, but you go out to clubs and it's just like top 40. After I moved to London for uni, I really wanted to go clubbing, so I asked my friends to take me clubbing. They took me to Tiger in Soho. I was so traumatized. I didn't go out for a year. Like, I was like, I can't do this anymore. In 2015, I really started. Like, I spent every weekend at Corsica Studios, like maybe twice a week sometimes. Like, I was just there every weekend, and that's when I really started making techno, because I was like, okay, cool, like this thing exists. So this is right before I became a proper raver. That's fine by me. Sounds better than dry. Now it's dry. Before I started making beats, because techno was so intimidating for me. Like, I love jazz, but you know, jazz fans are like, you play like 3 seconds of a clip and they're like, oh yeah, that was, you know, like Art Tatum at the Blue Note in like 1970 with like blah blah blah, and I'm just like, what the fuck? So, and that's how the techno world seemed to me as well. So I was like, like I already have all the disadvantages. Like, one, my parents aren't DJs or anything. I've never played a record in my life. I didn't have a turntable at home. I didn't grow up clubbing, other than to like Rihanna. And so obviously if I dive into techno, like I'm going to be like so completely shy. But what can I do to make myself a bit less shy? And I was like, I'm gonna go into electroacoustic music scene because that scene is dead. And then so I only started thinking about making really weird droney music with like no time signature, no key signature. It's so sad because like if I could go back and talk to 22-year-old me, I'd be like, that's all been done before actually, and there's nothing new. But this track I remember started, because I really, really love Aaliyah, like so much. I think she was such a visionary and so ahead of her time. And when I was falling asleep one night, I just kept hearing her humming in this track. And then I was like, ooh, I'm going to like mix it with microphone feedback, blah, blah, blah. But then obviously when you first start to learn production, it is like, there is no shortcut from what you hear in your head to what actually manifests at your hands. So it got really messed up, and then I was like, I'm just gonna slap a beat on it. And then Simara, the friend I played before, he was like, I sent it to him and he was like, yes, do this shit, except your snare pattern fucking sucks. And then I worked on it for ages. I had a 2-minute version put up on the SoundCloud, on my SoundCloud, and Henry and Will from Let's Go Swimming always really liked it. And when I was rewriting the Rex EP for the 3rd time, I was like, wait, why don't I just give them this track to release? And it's actually like one of my favorite tracks that were out. So this was all made in like Ableton Native, like it was this is, you know, like sub and kick synths put through the native grain delay. And that's actually why I stuck with Ableton when I started, because I saw grain delay on there. And I was like, this sounds so much better than Logic. And yeah, so this is actually a great DJ tool because there's a lot of silence, and I always use it to ram up the BPM between the silence. I played this at CDR, and then I noticed there wasn't enough bass. There's too much silence for the CDR DJ to like DJ without any preparation. I was watching him, and when this came on, he literally was like, which fader is it? Because it's silent for like 10 seconds. But yeah, it was still it was a really important track for me. And then after that, I moved on to the first track, which I really like. It's like the least dancey thing I've put out probably, other than my weird like music concrete stuff. And I made this because I really, really love percussion, and I wish I'd studied to be a percussionist instead of like playing piano, but that's what every Asian kid has to do, so like it's not like you get a choice. So
could have played shorter notes though. Could have played shorter notes.
I did do that, believe me. Yeah. But I was like, I really want to use percussion more like a melodic element, not so much as like a rhythm cutter. So this part is just drum rack, like bit crushed to bits, and then this is the accompanying part, which is a bit more clicky. I think mostly, yes. See, the thing about my workflow is it's so messy, I don't even remember. Where is my soloed track? That noise I really love. I just needed something to really cut off everything and just like chop everything in half, because it's got this pretty organ, but it's like a really melancholic track for me. Like this track always makes me really sad, and this is when like everything breaks, but the beat keeps going despite it. I don't like attaching narratives to songs, because for me like music is its own vehicle. It's not like a secondary thing to language. You know, it's not like background music to a story. So, but because unless I like tack a narrative onto it afterwards, I can't title my tracks. Otherwise, they're all called like track 2, track what the fuck, like track this is shit. So I referenced Cordelia from King Lear and her growth. So that's why it's called Princess is No Longer at This Address. And I wanted a moment where everything just gets cut by this. And then it begins again. Yeah, so that was that.
Was this equally as challenging to arrange?
Oh my god, yes. I hate arranging so much. I really think it's my biggest weakness.
What do you find challenging about it?
Sometimes I think I like sound more than I like music. And when you say you like sound more than music, the difference is basically that sound is that thing you hear in that moment. Music exists beyond what you're hearing. Like, let's say, Alia's Rock the Boat, why not? And if you think about the chorus, the intro exists before the chorus, right? And there's the verse after that, and there's the outro. But if you just say, oh, I like this sound, it's a momentarily thing. It's just that moment. And for me, it's so much easier to just be hedonistic and listen to what's happening at that precise moment than to think about what was there before and what was there after. And I think that's why I always improvised on the piano instead of learning pieces, was that I was like, okay, I need to get this out of me now. And it works now because of what was happening now. So, yeah. I also think it's because it's just because I'm really not made to make any pop music. Like, pop music is very well-structured, formulaic. I think it's one of the hardest things to do. And I can't do it because I'll be like, now a 20-minute drone interlude. And, you know, you can't do things like that. So it's still hard. But having that noise just like cutting everything away does help me kind of regroup myself. And it also gives freshness to this pattern that's been continuing for the last 2 minutes. So that's something I like to do. Like I wanna pull the rug from underneath the track.
Or a grounding, or almost like not a full stop or a comma or something.
Yeah, like when I feel like my tracks are getting a bit too grounded, I pull it apart. I'm like, it's not allowed. Yeah, I like music that makes you quite uncomfortable because, like, I think music is such a physical tool. You get like tingles from and I'm not into that word, so I don't know, but ASMR, and you feel bass, sub bass in your torso, and I think especially if you work in dance music, this is something you always have to realize. There's like sound is physics, and it really does move, like particles and stuff. So I like that about experimental electronic music or whatever it is that I am, because you can really go extreme with that stuff. Like imagine if a Rita Ora track had like really huge sub bass, like she would be inundated with complaints. But we don't have to worry about that. One, because we have like 10 people in the audience, and two, like I feel like it's a very, like I think dance music is a very practical, physical, body-bound genre in that way. Anyway, this is getting crazy. What's the time?
No, keep going, it's good. There'll be time for questions, and I've got a couple of questions for you.
I'm not even done. Okay, all the other Rex tracks don't matter anymore. I really, really like the Yeji remix I did. Yeji's one of those people who have like such good ear for rhythm and dance music, and like she's such a good DJ. But she can write melodies, she can write harmony, she can write songs.
You got your power adapter.
Oh! Don't worry,
I
brought a charger. Thank you. Could somebody plug in my
No,
charger?
I've got you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And when she asked me to remix one more, I was like, this is a perfect track. I don't know what else to do with it. I really like the melancholic melody. I really like the jazzy chords she puts in. And then I decided to just make it really moody. And this is one remix where I took so much care to have something evolving at all times. Like such minuscule differences, but it really meant to me that I did a lot of details. And what I mean by that is like this part repeats, but the next time it repeats, I have a slightly different EQ on the reverb. Or like one frequency is taken out. But it was worth it because I really, really love this song. Oh yeah, that's me putting a vocoder on the drum rack because why not? I think it's so silly when people are like, don't do this and don't do that, like because just trust your taste. This is something that's been like central to my work. Is like I taught myself a lot of things, and you know, I didn't know what bus was until like 2 years ago. I hadn't used the plugin at all for the first year I started producing. Everything was done on Ableton Native, but at the end, like, no one comes up to you and it's like, hey, I can tell you didn't bust your drums in this track. And I'm like, well, you're dancing to it because it sounds good, right? Like, and so that's the most important thing. Something...
On that tip, actually, a couple of questions, and then I guess the audience have got questions. So, your mixing process, is there one? Because
No.
Yeah, because I really get the sense it's almost like, I mean, I'm glad you really reference this idea of sound, and it's almost like this is a collage, right? This is just like a cacophony of elements that are together on in a timeline, and whatever they represent, they represent. Do you know what I mean? That's what I really get, because me, thinking dance music, I'm already thinking kick drum, with swimming the reverb is not really going to work on the dance floor, but clearly it does. There's no bass line per se, or the bass elements you've got are quite distorted, and they're quite, well, percussive for one, as you pointed out, but they're quite, and yeah, the levels are kind of, not all over the place, but they are kind of all over the place. Some tracks, the vocal's louder than the kick drum. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes the transitional sound is louder than the... Do you know what I mean? It's like it's just a cacophony of ideas just in a timeline. I really get that. Do you agree?
Yeah, that's a really nice way to put it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's because I listen to my own instinct more than like anybody else's. I mean, the only people whose opinion I care about is like the label heads who are going to put it out, my agent and my manager, and some of my closest friends whose music I like, and my girlfriend. Those are the only people I care about. So like when people comment on my Facebook being like, her music sucks, I'm like, well, I don't care because I don't really trust in your taste. So a lot of what I do is like really messy and really self-serving. Like I do think a lot of my work is masturbatory. I don't understand why people like it so much, but I'm really glad. Thank you. But for me, mixing and writing has always been a meshed up process. I don't understand how people write then mix down, because for me, if I don't mix the levels correctly while I'm writing, it changes my writing process. I'll be like, oh, I'll just take that element away because it's too dominant, whereas maybe it was just too loud, maybe there was too much of like a resonant frequency. So I always do it as I go along. And I remember DJ Pitch, when I was submitting the TTEP, he was like, do you need help with mixdown? And I was like, do I? I don't know, like you tell me, do I need help in mixdown? I'm so glad they still worked with me after this. Something I really recommend everyone download is, this is the Sim Hutchins remix I did, which turned out to get really good response despite me thinking it's shite. But this is like a good summary of. I like creepy things, and it's this guy called Michael Norris. He teaches music technology in Idaho or something, and he makes all of these plugins for free, and I downloaded the granular synthesis pack. This is the Object Blue sound. When people are like, how do you do what you do? This is it. Anyone can do it. Just download this pack. Also, I really like pitching up and down sounds in the most rudimental way in the Ableton Native. So this is already transposed down 8 semitones. There you go, experimental dance music. How easy is that? And something, I think this is me being a headphone listener for most of my life than dance music, but Autopan is so underrated as audio editing track. I do this a lot during my live sets where I change the rate of the Autopan. And if you do it really fast, it sounds like it's sizzling, you know?
Someone that goes into audio rates into them.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Yes. I think I don't have that much more to say. Something I always find curious is people say like, oh, she's genre breaking. And I'm like, okay. 'Cause I don't really think there's this genre and it sounds like this, I'm gonna break it. Like, that's not how I go into music. Oftentimes it's the opposite. I'm like, yeah, this is a great summertime track, like everyone like in the balcony drinking Aperol Spritz, and then I would play it to my friends and they're like, it sounds like a dead factory in the winter. So sad. But perhaps the reason I keep having these mysterious phenomenons is because I learned since I was quite young to not have any preconceived notion about music. So like I go back to Cardi, instead of hearing the tell that little bitch play her role, that one that repeats in Act Like It Then, and going, oh, that's from Bodak Yellow, just like listen to the sound and like listen to how she keeps her tongue on the roof of her mouth a lot, so it has this kind of squashed frequency range. And it's really interesting when she opens her mouth up at the next word. And you just listen to that. And then people call you genre bending. So I guess there's some interesting creative process to that. Also, John Cage's 433, where he would just sit in silence and make the audience listen to the ambient sound. And then somebody complained to him saying, what the hell was that? I can just listen to that at home. It was just like city noise or somebody coughing next to me. And he's like, exactly. Like, you know, we humans have like a really weird brain where we found superfluous things like pleasurable. And I find that to be like one of the moving forces of my desire to make music, is that it's just this sound repeating. And if you do this once, it's a noise. But if it happens at a certain interval over and over again, your brain registers it as rhythm or tempo, and it's suddenly interesting. And I really like that. Like, for me, music is just like such a hedonistic venture. So I don't really think about what does this mean? Like, what is this album about? It's about climate change. Like, no, like I don't even think that's like a great vehicle for protesting climate change, firstly. And secondly, like I said, it's a part of us that speaks to something really animalistic and like libido based, like really basic pleasure, but it's something only humans can make. And I really am interested in pushing that. So maybe this is why my music is weird, because that's what I think about, not about whether this is like Mix Mag approved. I don't know. No shade to Mix Mag, I love them. But one guiding force in this chaotic hedonistic venture of mine is my taste. Like, I know when I like something. Like, for example, TSVI sent me some chords. I love TSVI, and even those chords, I'm like, I don't like these chord progressions. And I have that because I have my own taste. And I'm not just blindly in love with everything TSVI makes. And I say to him, I think the last chords you wrote are better. And this is something I really, really struggled with for a long time, where I would listen to music and I would think about what I would change to it, what I would do, but I couldn't do it with my laptop, so that clearly means I have no talent, right? But I read an Ira Glass quote. Ira Glass, the writer, so obviously he works in a different medium, but he said, the reason why you start making art is because you have a very distinctive, powerful taste, where only consuming for you is not enough. You make your own thing. And for the first few years you start your craft is nowhere up to your taste, so it's going to be terrible. It's going to sound terrible for you. You're going to give up. Most people give up. But you just have to keep pushing. And there's going to be that one incident where you're like, actually, this does please my sound. And you just keep working at it until this increases. And then, like nowadays, I open Ableton and I know that I'm probably not going to hate everything I make. But in order to get there, it's really hard. But what you can do in the meantime is like listen to so much stuff and know what you like really, really well. Like as if you're your own number one fan and try to please that. And that's why I don't send other people my works in progress and ask, what do you think I should do? Because they have a completely different taste to mine. Like I could send something I really like to, say, like, I don't know, Laurel Halo. And if she says, take the midsection out and rewrite it, I'll be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, so, you know, like that person inside you that has that taste, I think is really, really integral in your craft, more than technical skill. And there's no right way to make music. I used to think like that the music world had this like secret like Illuminati thing going on, where like a certain people had this manual of how to make music, and once you had that manual, it was easy, it was organic, it was smooth, and it always sounded good. I found that there's no such thing. It's actually quite heartbreaking. You just have to keep trying and failing until it sounds all right. But somebody like emailed me, I get a lot of emails like, how do you write your music? How do you know when it's good? And I'm like, there's no right answer to this. I'm so sorry. Like, maybe it sounds bad to you, but it'll be good enough for somebody else. One good thing about the industry is you can relinquish that control and editorial process to somebody else. If DJ Pitch says it's good, this album is going out, you know? If like Sim Hutchins thinks my remix is good enough, it's going out, and I give up thinking. And I think that's that level of like that type of ego death is really important as well in making music, because in the end, if you like, as much as I say I make music to serve myself and my own desires, if I really wanted to be just that, I'd like lock myself up in like a lighthouse and just play organs, or you know. But I'm not doing it. Dance music, we have like, I think we have such a special relationship with listeners in dance music. It's not like pop music. Dance music is like where people actually gather to share that time and space, and we have a responsibility to those people. So, yeah, be arrogant about your own taste, but also let it go when you should.
Cool.
That's all.
Cool. Really, really insightful. I'm going to see if you guys what some questions you'd like to ask. Right, Brandon, 1 second.
Hi, that was really nice. Thanks. I was curious about your use of MIDI LFOs because I see that you combine a lot of them. So I'm wondering if you use that as a songwriting mechanism or just to modulate sound parameters in interesting ways in live sets. Or
It's usually just parameters. I wish I had enough of like generative music knowledge to let it write for me. I actually just bought Reactor recently, and I'm really looking forward to. Simon Sell actually did a talk like this, and he was like, I'm busy, like I can't just spend ages on a drum pattern, like I'm going to use generative methods to make drum patterns at once. I really wanted to be able to do that someday, but because I really love sound design, most of my LFOs are latched onto effect parameters or the velocity of the tunes. So instead of like a, rim hitting at like 16th note throughout, there's like a bit of like a messiness. But yeah, it's great other than the CPU, like especially when I do live sets or when I produce some of my tracks, I like bounce out 3 times because of the way LFO is behaving. But yeah, it's nice.
Question in the back there?
Yeah. Thank you very much. When you started playing at the beginning, did you only use a computer to perform?
Yes, because I didn't have a controller. And so I would click on the volume tab and drag it down and drag in. And then I got an Ableton push later, and that changed everything. But now I use CDJs to play, and it's really fun.
Nice one. Anyone else? Go for it.
You talk a lot about like hedonism in like music, and I was just wondering, it's like it seems that your process is like very painstaking, and obviously there's like a lot of like asceticism there, and I just wondered if there was like some sort of balance for you between like the two opposites.
Yeah, I think I'm quite an extreme person. Like, I talk a lot about hedonism, and like, for example, I didn't get out of bed until 5 this morning, and I was like eating like food I made out of a pan in bed, reading like manga. But another part of me is that I would lock myself up in a monastery for like a week, because it's good for me, and I really enjoy it. So I do think that manifests in my music. But I do think, for me, for a piece of music or art to keep my attention and really intrigue me and pull me into it, is this multifaceted dimension of aesthetic and hedonistic, or something like organic and mechanical, or pastel colors and like Vanta Black. I don't know. That seems to be, that's what moves me. If I psychoanalyze myself, it's because it's an integral part of human experience to be multifaceted. But that's what I'm guessing.
Can you explain, when you say you use CDJs for your live set, would you, let's say, have like a drum rack as a track for a CDJ and you sort of scroll through it like that? Or?
I did try that very hard on CDJs. I do set cue points. So let's open my record box. I did this because Zia and Mesh were doing it, 2 people whose music I like more than mine, by far. And I always thought like CDJs were so cool in how you can use them as controllers. You can go down the tempo violently. You can't do that in Ableton Live, like especially if you don't have master tempo on. It's going to pitch down as well as pull down the tempo. You can't do that in Ableton. And like the Pioneer mixes have all these effects on them. The EQing is really intuitive. You're not like clicking on a tiny like auto filter circle in Ableton Live and dragging it down, which is what I used to do. But my live set is, it's not Object Blues Anxiety Mix. So I bounce out stems and also complete tracks. And this is a beat I made for Unsound Festival.
Sim.
So this is what I do, and one amazing thing you can do on CDJs is play in reverse. When I run out of things to play at the end of my live set, I just play all my tracks in reverse, and it sounds great! I think my tracks sound better in reverse than forward. So this is pretty much what I do. But I am thinking about switching back to my push sets because it does make me feel really awkward to play my own tracks, like mixing my own tracks on CDJs for an hour. It makes me feel like a wanker. So just seeing what I would pair with this one.
So I guess on one deck you've got some kind of drum percussive element, and then on the other deck you've got some kind of sound, sort of tonal thing, right?
Yeah, I try to have at least 3 CDJs. So one serves a function, the other serves another function, and a third one is like, fuck, what do I play next? And I like playing it in loop, cutting the loop in half, having it until it's like, and then changing it. It's been a really fun. I've been doing this for like the last half a year, and I'm still deciding which I like more. But yeah.
And your DJ sets improvised?
Yes.
Yep.
I used to plan all my DJ sets meticulously. This is the track order. This is when I transition into the next one. I would have little notes. When I first started DJing, I had the notes app open on my phone, being like at 33 seconds, bring in the mid of this other track. But then I noticed that if I did that instead of actually enjoying DJing and reading the room, I just get really hung up on my own technical mistakes. What an egotistical thing to do. Like, these people are here to enjoy it, and you're just there being like, I didn't do this, I didn't do that. Which is like, if you wanted that, you could just go to the boiler room section, comment section. And so I thought it was in mine and my audience's best interest to really wing it. And that's what I do. And the adrenaline rush makes me a better DJ, in my opinion.
There's another question in the back there. Yeah, one there and then one at the back. Hold on.
What's behind your name and the choice of the colour blue?
Sorry?
What's behind your name?
Oh, I made it up. Sorry, it's a really boring answer. I just made it up.
Connection to blue then?
Maybe it's one of my favorite colours. One of.
Do you use much analog gear?
No, not at all. It's not like I have something against analog gear. It's more that I don't have any, and analog gear is not just something you can torrent and try out, Like, if someone wants to give me a bunch of analog gear to store in my room, I am right here. Email me. But no. Although I do really like using the Roland vocoder, because a studio I was at for a while had it, and it became a big part of my next release.
Cool. Go for it.
You sort of said you don't really set the scene for the tunes you make, and you don't think, oh, it could be played here, it could be played there, but is the focus always ultimately still on the club or not?
I think the focus is still on club, and that's why I feel a bit hurt when people are like, this is weird music, it's not just club music. And I was like, I love clubbing. I love drums, not even just club music, but I would listen to a lot of drums recorded in Côte d'Ivoire, that was that would be played live by an ensemble during a festival that everyone dances for, stuff like that. I really like regional folk music, and when regional folk music often is functional music, like a wedding song, for example, or a dance circle, or a religious spiritual thing. And so I was always really, really drawn to that. And I always do think when I make a track, like, will people still be dancing at this point, or are they going for a cigarette? But I do like to make exceptions sometimes. Like, I do really like a wide range of music. I do eventually want to write a string quartet, you know, stuff like that. But when I do, actually my next release is probably not going to be that dancey. But I do think naturally I am somebody who really likes moving to a beat, and that preference is always going to be there.
Nice one. Anyone else? Cool, go for it.
People, first of all, I really completely get what you're saying about genre and how that's kind of an irrelevant thing when you're making music for yourself. But people typically or often associate genres with like a geography, whether it's like Chicago and footwork or like Wigan here or whatever. What geography do you associate your music with, if any?
I associate it with London because like Corsica Studio is the one that did this to me, and it's really annoying actually when people say like, oh, like you're from Beijing and Tokyo, which is so exotic, and how did it affect your music? And I'm just like, I was so frustrated and stressed out when I grew up in Beijing because I didn't have music like this. Like, I came here just to dance. Like, I friggin' went through a visa process just so I could go clubbing. And then they're like, what would you say are your Asian influences? And I'm like, I listened to Alva Noto enough to bring myself to Europe. And so, yeah, although like now I know China's like trendy, and people have said to my face like, oh, it's a really great time for you because like being a Chinese producer is really trendy. And I'm like, oh, thanks, I changed my race last year just in time for this trend, yeah. Like right up to the fashion, innit? So I do think it's quite dumb. I think it is really like encouraging and validating that like no matter where I go in the world, there are always people dancing to tunes that you love as well. And like I did a Asia tour and it was great. I felt like I really belonged, and the club was like this amazing experience, and it really does make me think like, wow, like there is some commonality that transcends borders.
Nice one. Anyone else? Go for it.
My memory sucks, so just say if I'm like misquoting it. I think like towards the beginning you said you often have like specific sounds in your head you want to get out, but then from your process it often seems like you're discovering the sounds in that process. Would you say like you mainly do just create sounds that you're thinking up, or are you mainly like discovering sounds?
I think it's half-half. Like I'm still there are still a lot of technical skills I lack. Like I say, I'm only just learning Reactor. So a lot of it is just like me groping in the dark, and maybe sometimes it sounds good. Although like I would say I have a very specific taste, but my taste isn't even that interesting. Like people make fun of me, like my friends make fun of me like, oh, there's a construction going on, I bet you like how it sounds. And I'm like, yeah, I do, leave me alone. But I do know that for this next stage, I want something where the structure breaks down entirely and starts anew or something like that, and I'm still really working towards it. So I do have some goals I keep in mind, and I use a lot of the, you know, like the add locator function in Ableton, where you can leave little notes for yourself. In order not to forget it, I like put directions to myself there, like put a whistly sound here, or like something like green perfume, I don't know, figure it out. And then I look back at it and I'm like, thanks, me. So yeah.
Cool. Go for it.
Yeah, I've got quite a weird question. You know when you, for example, playing DJ sets, and a lot of DJs in their like interviews saying, yeah, like we looking on the people who's coming, how they behave and all that stuff. So when you playing DJ set, do you actually look, oh, like dance floor is half empty right now, should I change BPM? Or actually where you're playing, you actually want to present yourself because people know they came to see you and they want to like, you know, see your taste, or what's your approach on like quite a like selection of songs?
One, I don't like to look at the audience because I get really shy when I play. Two, I do think as an artist that if you have fans or if you have some sort of artistic success, then it's very important to play what you want, because that's what makes you an artist, right? But with that being said, I do also think you're a wanker if you are just like playing to an empty dance floor and everyone's just like standing around awkwardly and you're like, yeah, I'm amazing, this is genius, like my set list is perfect. I think it's just like, who do you think you are? So another boring answer, but I guess I do both. Yeah, like I love to see people dancing, and because I don't look up when I DJ a lot, I listen, and when people start like yelling or just like hooting or like throwing gum fingers right in my face, I'm like, okay, cool, this is what they want. Like I played in Brighton, and I haven't been there in like 10 years. I don't really know what the scene is like. But then I was watching the set before me, and I was like, I feel like the audience is craving some melodic riff or some bass or like broken beats. So I tried it in my first few tracks, and the response was great. So I was like, okay, cool. So yeah, I do take that into account.
So, what's next for you?
I'm working on my next release really slowly.
Okay. Of course. And are you taking the arranged approach, or are you taking a performative approach? Are you going back to that?
It's arranged because it's really personal, so...
Why is it so personal?
Because it's about my fiancé.
So it's a love record.
Can we move on?
No. I mean, that's good. It's obviously it's great that we have the opportunity to celebrate our commitment to our loved ones with our art form. You know, so what made you decide to dedicate your third EP to your loved one?
I didn't decide; it just happened. Like I say, I really hate making music about something that's outside of music. Like when people are like, "This album is about the French Revolution," I'm like, what? How do you even begin to do that? Like I know it might seem hypocritical because I should probably close this. It might seem hypocritical because like, you know, my second EP references like King Lear a lot, but that only came after. I was never like, I'm gonna make an album about King Lear. It was more like, I have 4 really messy tracks that are different from each other. How do I sell it to my label as like a cohesive thing? And then it became that. And I've never been able to write music about my feelings. You know, people are like, oh, I was really heartbroken, so I wrote this album. Like, I'm really mystified those people. I don't know how that happens. For me, I just like call my friends and cry, or like write like really long poems. But it's never entered music making for me, like I say, because it's a very hedonistic purpose and it's not a thought or logic driven thing. But I just ended up writing this material when I first met her, and it's still my favorite album, like favorite material to date, even past the 2 EPs. So I think it's time to finish it and release it, but it's so hard. I just want to go back to making like bangers. It's really, really hard, but it's worth it, I guess.
And has it got a particular direction or a particular aesthetic?
Yes, but I am going to be... Can I talk about this? Yeah. I am going to be doing like a live premiere of the material in late August.
So a deadline right there, right?
Oh God. Today my manager emailed me like, when are you finishing the music? And I was like, I don't know.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Thank you, Sarah.
But the good thing is, you could, if you want, this is just, it's not even advice, you can obviously take inspiration from the first record that you did, right? In terms of approach to finishing.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, that approach has been going on for like a year and a half, so let's see.
Cool. Well, Object Blue, this has been amazing. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you for your time.
Cool. Yeah, man.